Hey, true advocates, it's me, Eric Carter-Landin, and I'm so excited to be back in front of my microphone today. I apologize for my extended absence. Things have gotten quite a bit crazier for me in my day job, and I've gotten a little bit of a break over the holidays, so I was able to get some work done, and now I'm recording this episode. This is actually the second time I'm recording it. This episode was supposed to come out on Sunday, January 7th, but the episode got corrupted. I am re-recording it now. Stick around to the end of the episode. I've got some important updates about True Consequences and some things that are going to be happening here in the near future. We are going to be going bi-weekly going forward just to help make sure that I can stay on top of things. But there's going to be a big, huge, giant announcement at the end of this episode, so don't forget to stick around to the end so you don't miss it. All right, with that, let's get into the episode. On Saturday, October 11th, 2003, police were called to County Road 136B, 10 miles north of Espanola, following the discovery of a deceased female, 37-year-old Yvonne Martinez. Yvonne had been brutally murdered, and it was clear from the scene that a struggle had occurred. Despite the investigation identifying several suspects and many crucial pieces of evidence, the case has continued to remain unsolved for over 20 years. I'm Eric Carter-Landin, and this is True Consequences. Yvonne Martinez was a much-loved and well-known member of the Espanola community. She was born Yvonne Archuleta to her parents, Sippy and Mary, and she had two sisters, Pamela and Beverly. Yvonne was described as a tomboy who enjoyed fishing and spending time in the mountains. She loved her family and friends unconditionally, enjoyed good chats, and is described as a very trusting person who was not afraid of anything. At 19, Yvonne gave birth to a son, Gabriel, who was raised by Sippy and Mary. The reason for this is unknown, but Yvonne remained within her son's life and continued to have a strong relationship with both of her parents. Through many reports, Yvonne is described as having a positive outlook on life. However, she faced many losses over a short period of time, which began to take a toll on her mental health. The first family tragedy occurred in October of 1989. Yvonne's sister, 21-year-old Beverly, had arrived home at around 9 p.m. after spending time with her boyfriend. Initial reports suggested that the young couple were arguing, but her father, Sippy, later disputed this fact. Sippy stated that after being dropped off at home, Beverly realized she left her jacket in her boyfriend's truck and began chasing after it. She grabbed the rear of the truck and lost her footing, falling onto the median of the highway. Her sister Pamela was present at the time and attempted to pull Beverly off of the road, but she was too late. Beverly was struck by a passing tractor trailer and killed instantly. Just 4 years later, in 1993, the father of Yvonne's son, Medardo Chavez Jr., also passed away unexpectedly. By 2003, Yvonne was struggling with depression and was experiencing an ongoing battle with alcohol addiction, which had affected a lot of her close family relationships. Her son was now 18 years old, and in June of 2003, he was charged with battery after getting into a fight with Yvonne. After this, Gabriel had returned to the home of his grandparents, and the relationship between the mother and son was described as strained. Just a month later, in July, Yvonne experienced another loss when her husband of 7 years, Johnny Martinez, was killed during a physical altercation. Reports state that Johnny had traveled to Santa Cruz Lake with a family friend named Donna. There, they met with Donna's cousin Leroy and his son Derek. The group were talking and fishing for a while before Donna and Leroy had attempted to leave together. Derek then became extremely angry, accusing them both of leaving to carry out drug-related activity. During the argument, Derek had pushed Donna to the ground and a physical fight quickly broke out. Yvonne's husband Johnny pulled out a knife and stabbed Derek in the hand and knee. Derek then fought the knife from Johnny's hands and admitted he had begun swinging wildly in his direction. Johnny's wounds were too severe to be treated and he was pronounced dead later that day. By October of 2003, Yvonne was living alone and had recently lost her job. She did not have a car, so she relied on others for rides to the grocery store or to friends' houses. Her sister Pamela says people generally love to help, as Yvonne would always repay people by cleaning their homes or carrying out other household chores that they did not want to do. When she was unable to catch a ride with her friends, Yvonne's fearless nature meant that she would also ask strangers for help getting home. On the Friday evening of October 10th, 2003, Yvonne dropped by her friend's home to request a ride to the Hotel Casino in Oke Owinge. Gloria was hosting a baby shower at the time and was unable to leave her guests. However, Gloria's sister Tina was about to leave, so she agreed to take Yvonne with her. During the ride, Yvonne told Tina that she was meeting with friends but did not specify who. As they arrived at the casino, Yvonne asked Tina if she would drop her by the rear of the building, but Tina decided to take her to the front entrance as she believed that this would be safer. Tina waited while Yvonne entered the casino before making her way home. The following day, Eddie Montano Jr. was out test riding an ATV that he and his father had spent the afternoon working on. He decided to take it for a ride on County Road 136B and was just minutes into his journey when he discovered Yvonne's partially clothed body lying at the side of the road. Eddie Jr. rushed home to tell his father, and they traveled back together to verify what he had seen. Eddie Sr. quickly returned home and dialed 911. New Mexico State Police arrived on scene around 5 p.m. and began a homicide investigation immediately. Yvonne was found lying on her back with a visible gunshot wound to her cheek and a large laceration on her shoulder. Impressions and drag marks in the sand suggested that a struggle had occurred, and the suspect had attempted to hide Yvonne's body in some nearby bushes. The scene was cordoned off, and police began photographing the area and gathering as much evidence as possible. As the evening progressed, lights were used to illuminate the area, and officers took cast impressions of the shoe prints and tire tracks near Yvonne's body so that they were not disturbed by the strong winds that evening. After determining that Eddie Jr. and Eddie Sr. had not approached Yvonne, police were confident that the ground impressions around her body were left by the person or people responsible for her death. As police continued to process the crime scene, they received an alert about an ongoing incident at a residence in Espanola, which may have been connected to Yvonne's death. Several officers were dispatched and arrived at the scene, learning that the occupant of the home, Chris Branch, had attempted to take his own life and had left a note for his girlfriend claiming that he had, quote, done something very wrong, end quote. New Mexico State Police collected multiple pieces of evidence, such as the note written by Chris, a watch soaked in blood, and detailed the incident just in case it would later become relevant in their investigation. By now, police on scene had identified the female as Yvonne Martinez using a driver's license found in the front pocket of her blue jeans. An officer was dispatched to her home in Huachupangue at around 10:30 p.m. When he arrived at Yvonne's trailer, he noted that the front door was wide open and loud music could be heard coming from the inside. Furniture was scattered in the kitchen, and he believed that a struggle may have occurred. The officer secured the home and made his way over to the neighboring trailer, where he interviewed two brothers who had been living next to Yvonne for a short while. One brother said that he left the trailer around 2 hours earlier and saw a man standing in the doorway of Yvonne's home while the music was blaring loud. He had not looked for long enough to provide a detailed description, but described him as having long dark hair and a dark t-shirt. He couldn't recall seeing the male before, but both brothers described Yvonne's trailer as a, quote, constant party, end quote, with lots of different people coming in and out regularly. The brothers admitted that they'd had disagreements with Yvonne due to the loud music, but they kept their concerns to themselves as they did not want police to get involved. As the officer interviewed Yvonne's neighbors, forensics continued at the crime scene. Several hairs and fiber samples were found and collected from Yvonne's body, and a discarded cigarette was located nearby. Police also swabbed blood stains and an unknown substance found on Yvonne's clothing, before placing everything into evidence. Police eventually left at 4:30 a.m., and the scene was guarded by a uniformed police officer until the next morning when forensics could resume. At 5:15 a.m. on Sunday, October 12th, police arrived at the home of Yvonne's parents and spoke to Sippy Archuleta, informing him that his daughter had been murdered. Both Sippy and Yvonne's son Gabriel were present, and both were in an obvious state of shock. They agreed to come to the station that morning to provide any information that would help the investigation. The interviews began around 8 a.m. that morning. Sippy told police that he hadn't seen his daughter in around 2 weeks, but had spoken to her on the phone just a few days prior. Yvonne had called the family home asking to speak to her son and was disappointed to learn that he wasn't there. Sippy tried to make conversation with Yvonne, but said that she ended the call soon after. Sippy then described the family dynamic to officers, explaining that Yvonne's battle with alcoholism had caused her and her son's relationship to deteriorate. Gabriel had been living with Sippy and Mary for the last 2 months after a court had granted them full custody. On Saturday, October 11th, Sippy and Gabriel had made plans to travel to Yvonne's trailer to pick up some of Gabriel's belongings that were still in the home. They stopped by a gas station on the way, and Gabriel picked up pizzas for himself and Yvonne. When they arrived, Sippy waited in the truck while Gabriel went inside. When explaining why, he said that he and his daughter don't see eye to eye when she is intoxicated, and he would usually stay out of the way to avoid disagreements. After a few minutes of waiting, though, Gabriel returned to the truck with his belongings and told Sippy that Yvonne was not home. Sippy then watched Gabriel secure the trailer and they returned home together. Officers asked Sippy if he was aware of any romantic interest in Yvonne's life, but he was unsure. Sippy said that there were always people in her trailer whenever he had visited, but he had never stayed around to get to know anybody. Gabriel's interview then took place, and he told police that the last time he spoke to his mother was on a phone call 3 days prior. She had informed him about a physical fight that had recently occurred between her and her best friend, Debbie Martinez. Yvonne had told him that she had traveled to Coyote with Debbie to go partying with Debbie's boyfriend. She told him that they were having a good time, but at some point, the women had gotten into an argument before hitting each other. Yvonne mentioned that during this fight, she had been hit in the face with a beer bottle. Gabriel was unaware of any further details but believed alcohol was likely involved. Sippy and Gabriel then returned home. However, Sippy contacted the police just a few hours later asking if they could interview another one of Yvonne's friends, Paula, as she had some more information about the fight that had occurred. Paula spoke with police explaining that she had met with Yvonne on October 7th and they had spent the evening discussing the incident between Yvonne and Debbie. Yvonne had mentioned that they were having a good time drinking and dancing when she started chatting to Debbie's boyfriend, Manuel. Debbie noticed the pair having a conversation and quickly became jealous, accusing Yvonne of flirting with Manuel and lashing out at her. The fight began and went on for a few minutes before Debbie picked up a beer bottle and hit Yvonne in the face with it, causing a cut above her nose. After this, Manuel had separated the two women and Yvonne walked out of the home upset. Paula and Yvonne had spent the rest of the evening chatting before she eventually drove Yvonne home. A few days went by and Paula received a call from Yvonne on October 10th. She told Yvonne that she was busy at work and would call her back, but she had gotten distracted and she hadn't heard from her since. The investigation continued throughout the day on Sunday, October 12th. Detectives began processing Yvonne's home and hoped to gather more evidence that would lead to answers. Unfortunately, there were no tire or shoe prints that matched those at the crime scene, and police were only able to recover 3 fingerprints from the front and rear door of the trailer. They noted that Yvonne's rear door was splintered and unable to be locked, but Sippy told police that Yvonne would prop a metal chair up against it to keep it closed. After photographing and searching the trailer, it was determined that the only item missing was Yvonne's cordless phone. Detectives then returned to the crime scene to request an update from forensic technicians. They were advised that only 2 sets of footprints were found in the immediate area, with one set determined to be Yvonne's. At this stage, they believed that she was killed by a lone suspect. Crime scene technicians had also located one of Yvonne's earrings about 25 feet away from where her body was found, and they believed that this was likely the area where the initial attack took place. Another cigarette was found nearby, as well as a pencil and an impression of pliers in the sand. The forensic team had cast the impression of the pliers and collected the other items for further analysis. Processing of the crime scene was completed at around 3:30 p.m. that day, and Yvonne's body was removed shortly after. Yvonne's autopsy took place the following day, on Monday, October 13th, and determined that she had been shot twice. The first gunshot wound had entered her upper back and had exited through her left shoulder, causing the large laceration seen by officers at the scene. The second gunshot had entered her right cheek, causing 2 skull fractures and major bleeding. There were also visible blunt force injuries on Yvonne's arms, legs, and ankles. One of her fingers was bruised and the nail was torn. The pathologist stated that while the second shot had not entered Yvonne's brain, the bleeding and bruising of the surrounding soft tissue had led to brain hemorrhaging, which had eventually caused her death. The toxicology report determined that Yvonne had alcohol in her bloodstream, but no other substances were found. During examination, the pathologist also discovered a star-shaped pattern on the back of Yvonne's jacket where the first bullet had entered. He concluded that Yvonne had likely been shot with bullets covered by a plastic casing known as a sabot, which were known to cause this distinctive pattern. With this information, officers began investigating the possibility that the suspect had used .30 caliber accelerator cartridges to shoot Yvonne. In summary, these cartridges are made by placing a .22 caliber bullet inside of a plastic casing, or a sabot, which then allows it to be inserted into a .30 caliber weapon. The .22 caliber bullet can be fired at a much higher velocity, which causes a devastating impact. Detectives began interviewing store owners to determine where the suspect may have purchased this unique type of ammunition. After questioning multiple stores, they eventually spoke to one local gun store owner who claimed he had recently sold 2 boxes of the Remington 30-06 accelerator cartridges. The owner hadn't sold these cartridges for around 6 years, but had purchased 2 boxes by accident earlier that year. Around a month prior, a male had entered the store and requested the bullets specifically before paying in cash. The store owner said the man had arrived on a turquoise-colored Harley-Davidson and a woman was present with him at the time. The man then returned 2 weeks later and bought the last box, but this time he was alone and driving an older model car. The store owner described the man as tall and muscular with a light beard and a mustache. He was wearing glasses and a derby-style hat. Since purchasing the last box, he had not returned to the store. After speaking to the store owner, detectives returned to the crime scene with a metal detector to try to locate the projectile. They scanned and sifted through the soil for hours, locating 2 adult teeth, which were later determined to be Yvonne's. Unfortunately, they were unable to locate either of the bullets. We're going to take a quick break. Later that day, police received a phone call from Yvonne's friend Gloria and learned that her sister Tina had taken Yvonne to a casino on the evening before she was discovered. After meeting with both sisters, police traveled to the OK Owingay Casino and spoke to the surveillance operation manager, Ann Vargas, who allowed officers to access the surveillance videos from the Friday evening. The surveillance showed Yvonne arriving at around 8:30 p.m. and entering through the front entrance of the casino. Through the evening, she had spent most of her time in the casino or bar area and was observed chatting with lots of different people. Yvonne was seen leaving the bar for a final time at 1:32 a.m. Prior to exiting the casino, she was recorded chatting with a male who was later identified as a regular named Patrick. She then left through the rear doors at 1:50 a.m. and walked away alone. This was the last official sighting of Yvonne. The attending officers requested a copy of the tapes to place into evidence, but due to the tribal laws, the casino would not allow the footage to be taken off the property. The officers were assured that the casino would keep a copy of the tapes so that they could be accessed in the future if needed. Police then located Patrick and brought him to the station for questioning. He explained that he had seen Yvonne at some point through the night and believed he may have even hugged her at one point. However, he told officers he was very intoxicated. He spent the entire day drinking alcohol with his friends prior to leaving the casino at around 2 a.m. Yvonne had approached him and asked if he could give her a ride home. He and his friends were planning to get something to eat, so he told her he would give her a ride later if she was still around. Patrick and his friends then went to a nearby restaurant and ordered food. A short while later, Yvonne entered the restaurant and asked Patrick for a ride again. He said he and his friends didn't really acknowledge her request as they were all drunk and wanted to eat. Yvonne then left the restaurant. Patrick denied any involvement in Yvonne's death and following the interview provided officers with the unwashed clothing that he was wearing that Friday evening. On Thursday, October 16th, 5 days after Yvonne's body was found, police located Debbie Martinez and questioned her regarding the fight that she had with Yvonne. Debbie described her and Yvonne as best friends who had remained close for many years. She said she had driven to Yvonne's trailer on October 4th to pick her up, and they traveled to the Coyote to visit Debbie's boyfriend, Manuel. They arrived at his home at around 1 p.m. that day. According to Debbie, they had all had a bit too much to drink, and after seeing Manuel and Yvonne chatting, she got jealous and confronted her. She confirmed that she had hit Yvonne in the face with a glass bottle and that Yvonne had left after the fight was broken up. Yvonne had begun walking along the highway trying to return home to Espanola. Debbie said that she sat there angry for a while before realizing that Yvonne was her best friend and quickly decided to go after her. She eventually caught up with her and said they had to apologize to each other before Yvonne agreed to return to Manuel's home. Debbie said they then continued partying for a few hours before they all fell asleep. She told police that Yvonne had left by herself sometime in the early morning hours, which was not something that was unusual for her. Debbie explained that in the days prior to their fight at Manuel's house, Yvonne had called her and told her that an Indian male had showed up at her trailer unexpectedly and began asking her for sex. Yvonne said that he would not take no for an answer, and she eventually had to throw him out. She did not mention his name. Debbie was also aware of a male named Sisto who had been involved with Yvonne. She told police that he owned a red-colored pickup truck that she had seen several times outside of Yvonne's trailer. Finally, police asked Debbie if she had any involvement in Yvonne's death, and she became upset as she told them she didn't. The same day, detectives received the call records from Yvonne's home. The cordless handset remained missing, and the records puzzled police even more. They discovered that 10 calls had been placed between 3:16 and 3:43 a.m. on Saturday, October 11th, an hour after Yvonne had been captured, leaving the casino on CCTV. They hadn't yet determined whether Yvonne had made it home, and it appeared somebody had used her handset to call a variation of similar numbers over and over until the call finally went through. After further investigation, the number was found to be registered to a Debbie Martinez in Colorado. It's important to note that this was not the same Debbie Martinez who was Yvonne's best friend. Before officers could act on this information, they received another call from Ann Vargas at the OK Casino asking officers to show up because she believed she had found footage that would help their investigation. Police went back to the casino where Ann showed them the footage of Yvonne wandering aimlessly for around 30 to 40 minutes before approaching the money cage. Another male enters the frame and Yvonne seems to acknowledge him before speaking with the cashier, Andrea. Yvonne could then be seen walking away. After viewing the tape, officers located Andrea in the casino and asked about her interaction with Yvonne. She remembered that Yvonne had approached the money cage at around 12:45 a.m. and had handed her a check to be cashed. Andrea said something felt off with the check and she feared it was fraudulent, so she declined it. And Yvonne began pleading with her. After Andrea insisted that she was not going to cash the check, Yvonne became upset and left. Yvonne walked in the opposite direction towards two males who were sitting near an ATM. As Yvonne got closer to them, the males stood up and began walking in the same direction as her, leading Andrea to believe that the three of them were together. Officers took Andrea to the surveillance room and asked her to point out Yvonne on the footage as well as the two males who she believed were following her. These males were later identified as two cousins. They were brought into the station for questioning on Sunday, October 19th. As officers began questioning one of the brothers, it became clear that he was underage and believed that he was in trouble due to his use of the casino and alcohol consumption. The detective explained that they were investigating the murder of Yvonne Martinez and asked why it appeared that he and his cousin were following her that evening. He became visibly confused and he could not remember ever seeing Yvonne and had no idea why it appeared that way. After the interview concluded, he was escorted home and provided police with the clothing that he wore that evening. Both he and his cousin were then ruled out as suspects. On October 21st, detectives continued their investigation into the mysterious calls made from Yvonne's residence in the early morning hours of October 11th. After arriving in Colorado, police visited the home where the number was registered and spoke to Debbie, who admitted she had no idea who Yvonne was. While the interview was taking place, Debbie's daughter entered the room and told officers that she remembered numerous calls coming in around 3 a.m. that day. Her mother had spent the evening out, and she told police that her older sister Angelica had answered the call. After speaking with Angelica, police learned that the calls were made by one of her mother's friends, Andy Borden. She said during the call his speech was slurred and he was mumbling incoherently, asking to speak to her mother. Angelica told Andy that her mother was at home and he insisted on speaking to her instead. Eventually, Angelica got upset with him and ended the call. He had tried to call a few more times, but she refused to answer. Angelica told the police that Andrew Borden had black hair, a dark complexion, and lived in New Mexico on the Santa Clara Pueblo Indian Reservation. Officers returned to New Mexico and located Andy. He was interviewed at around 1 p.m. the following day. According to the police report, Andy was visibly nervous and would not look officers in the eye while he was speaking with them. He was reluctant to talk about himself and would stumble over his own words when giving answers. The investigators immediately suspected that he was being deceptive. Andy was then questioned about Yvonne. He told police that he knew of her son, Gabriel, but had no personal relationship with her. He claimed that he had not seen her for around a month. Officers asked him what he was doing on the evening of October 10th, and he told them that he was attending a birthday party with his friend Jerry. He told police that he had remained at the party until the early hours of the morning, when he decided to leave and walked home alone. Police asked if he had stopped by Yvonne's trailer that evening, and Andy told them that he hadn't. Police then became frustrated, admitting that they had evidence that placed Andy in Yvonne's home and demanded that he start telling them the truth. Eventually, Andy admitted that he had walked by the trailer on his way back from the party and stopped by to see if she was there. He was aware that the rear door did not lock, so he walked around the back and let himself in. The trailer was empty, and so he waited for a while before deciding to make some personal phone calls from her phone. He said he then began to grow nervous that Yvonne would return, so he took the handset outside and continued to make calls. He claimed that he was afraid to re-enter the trailer, so he took the handset with him and smashed it to pieces before scattering it on the way home. When asked how he knew her rear door did not lock, he admitted that he had sexual relations with Yvonne in the past and had spent time in her home. Andy claimed that he hadn't told the truth initially, as he believed that he would be arrested for letting himself into the trailer, and he thought he'd be in trouble for using her phone without permission. As the interview concluded, Andy agreed to provide an oral DNA sample. He also directed officers to the area where he had discarded the handset, allowing them to locate several of the broken pieces on the ground. Andy's story was then corroborated by his friend Jerry, who had attended the same birthday party with him that evening. However, Jerry claimed to have left at 10 p.m. and could not account for Andy's whereabouts after this. Jerry also agreed to provide an oral DNA sample. In the following weeks, police gathered the evidence, crime scene reports, and interview transcripts to conduct a physical evidence analysis. In doing so, they were able to record a summary of what they believed had occurred. Yvonne was taken to County Road 136B in a vehicle. Due to the tire impressions, turning movements, track width, and tire circumference, they believed the vehicle was most likely a four-wheel drive pickup truck. Paint flakes found at the scene also led detectives to believe that the vehicle was red in color. Foot impressions showed that after the vehicle had stopped at the side of the road, Yvonne and the suspect had walked a short distance before Yvonne's footprints had suddenly stopped. In this area, indentations in the dirt showed that a violent struggle had occurred. Yvonne had fought her attacker, losing her earring and tearing her nail in the process. Police suspected that Yvonne was then beaten with a pair of pliers due to the tool impression in the sand nearby. At some point during the struggle, she was able to free herself and began running away. It is believed that the suspect had then shot at Yvonne, hitting her in the upper left portion of her back and knocking her to the ground. Police speculate that the suspect had walked over to Yvonne and shot her again while she was lying on the ground. The suspect then attempted to conceal her body in the nearby trees and manipulated her clothing to make it appear as though she had been sexually assaulted. On December 16, 2003, a $5,000 reward was offered for any information that would lead to the arrest of Yvonne's killer. Weeks later, on January 10th, police published an appeal for information after receiving a cryptic postcard which included vague information about Yvonne's death and suggested knowledge of the suspect. Police asked the person who sent the postcard to come forward, assuring that they would remain anonymous. 6 months after Yvonne's death, the case was transferred to a new detective, Agent Thomas Salazar. After being briefed on the details, he spoke to the other officers in the department to get a general idea of what they believed happened. The consensus was that Chris Branch, the man who tried to take his own life on the evening that Yvonne was discovered, was likely responsible. They advised him that Chris owned a red four-wheel truck at the time which hadn't been seen since the day of Yvonne's murder. He had also been arrested on domestic charges just days after Yvonne's body was found and had visible scratches on his face and neck. Agent Salazar spoke with Chris's mother, Elaine, who insisted that her son had an ongoing alcohol addiction but was not a murderer. She showed the detective to Chris's red truck in the yard and said that the visible damage to the passenger side had occurred prior to Yvonne's death. The detective then spoke to Chris directly, who confirmed that this truck had been wrecked during an accident in September, and a police report had been filed at the time. He said that the scratches on his neck on October 16th were sustained during a domestic incident which he was arrested for. He denied involvement in the death of Yvonne and said the only information he had was what he had learned from the newspapers at the time. On July 16, 2004, the team received confirmation from a private forensic laboratory that a major male DNA profile was found on Yvonne's fingernail clippings. The DNA was entered into CODIS, but no matches were found. Months later, Agent Salazar was requested to speak to a male named Diego Maestas, who was incarcerated at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Albuquerque. He claimed he had previously lived with Yvonne and Gabriel and that he believed Gabriel was going crazy, as he knew who was responsible for his mother's death, but was too afraid to tell anyone about it. The detective gathered a DNA sample from Diego and made a report of his claims. In the following months, after speaking with Gabriel, it was determined that he was experiencing a mental health crisis and had no additional knowledge about Yvonne's death. Regardless, Gabriel agreed to provide a voluntary DNA sample, which was collected and stored. Agent Salazar then decided to re-interview Debbie Martinez, Yvonne's best friend. At the time, Debbie was also incarcerated in Rio Arriba County. The detective was investigating a local theory that Debbie had asked an 18th Street gang member who was friends with her son to murder Yvonne after the fight. Debbie denied those claims. She said that Yvonne was a good person until she was drunk, and they'd had many drunken arguments throughout their friendship that had never led to anything serious. This time, she denied ever hitting Yvonne with a bottle and told detectives that most people believe Derek Lane is responsible. Following this discussion, Agent Salazar began looking into Derek Lane and discovered that he had a long criminal history dating back to 1995, which included burglary, aggravated battery, and drug offenses. The detective also discovered Derek's involvement in an eerily similar case that had occurred 2 weeks after Yvonne's body was found. 25-year-old Ariana Rendon was out partying with her friends at Club Tropicana in Espanola on the evening of October 28, 2003. She remained there until after midnight when she exited the venue, climbing into a van with one of her friends and an unknown male. That male turned out to be 21-year-old Derek Lane. At some point during their journey, Ariana's friend asked to leave the van as Derek had begun making strange comments and freaking her out. He pulled over to let her friend exit the vehicle before driving off with Ariana. This was the last time Ariana was seen alive. Her body was found days later at the side of the road on US 285, and it was determined that she had been beaten to death following a brutal sexual assault. At the time of her death, Ariana was working as a slot machine girl at the Oke Owinge casino, where Yvonne was last seen. While following up on this lead, Agent Salazar interviewed a man named Juan, who had been living with Derek Lane's cousin during the period of the murders. Juan claimed that in late October of 2003, Derek Lane had arrived at their residence and asked if he could trade his red van for some cocaine. When asked why, Derek told them that the van contained evidence from him killing Ariana Rendon and the woman from the casino. The detective followed up on this information by questioning Derek Lane. At the time, he was incarcerated on numerous charges and awaiting trial for the murder of Ariana Rendon. Derek claimed that the accusations were false and he was not involved in Yvonne's death. He also provided the police with a DNA sample. Over the course of the investigation, police had gathered DNA from Andy Borden, his friend Jerry, Yvonne's son Gabriel, Diego Maestas, and Derek Lane. The swabs were sent off to be compared to the male profile found under Yvonne's fingernails, but all provided negative results. By the second-year anniversary of Yvonne's murder, the case had gone cold. In April of 2010, Yvonne's son Gabriel also passed away at the age of 25, leaving the entire Archuleta family devastated. 3 years later, Yvonne's father, 69-year-old Sippy Archuleta, also tragically passed away. According to reports, Sippy had been traveling home at around 11 p.m. when he was hit by a driver who had not seen him walking on the side of the road. He was well known in the community due to his lifelong career in the Postal Service, and he is dearly missed by many. Unfortunately, both passed away without ever knowing who had taken Yvonne's life. In April 2019, the case was reopened and a review was carried out. Officers sent off both cigarettes found at the scene as well as Chris Branch's suicide note and watched for further analysis. DNA collected from one of the cigarettes was deemed too insufficient to provide a full DNA profile, and the rest of the items provided negative results. It's now been 20 years, and investigators are no closer to determining who was responsible for Yvonne's brutal murder. However, they believe somebody has answers and can provide peace to her remaining family members. If you have any information regarding this case, please contact the New Mexico State Police Cold Case Homicide Unit at 505-827-9066 or email coldcase.homicideunit@state.nm.us. Okay, that's the end of the episode, and I promised that I would have an important announcement for you at the end. So congratulations, you made it. So this is the announcement. True Consequences podcast has been under my LLC known as True Consequences Productions since I started this podcast. And things have gotten a little bit difficult for me. As I mentioned before, I got promoted at work, and my job has really started to take a lot of my free time away from me, which has made it difficult for me to produce new episodes. I've been thinking long and hard about this, and I've decided that I'm going to merge True Consequences podcasts with Angels Voices Silenced No More. Now, I've talked about this a few times, but if you don't know, Angels Voices Silenced No More is a nonprofit that I founded along with my mom to help family members in New Mexico who are fighting for justice or looking for answers for their missing loved ones. The organization itself grants funds to families to pay for things like funeral expenses, search and rescue parties, DNA testing, billboards, internet ads, flyer printing, counseling, and anything that a family may need in their fight for justice or answers. So starting in May, True Consequences is going to be the voice of Angels Voices Silenced No More. We're still going to cover unsolved cases. I'm still going to do the advocacy that you all know and are used to. That's still happening. We're going to be working more closely with families that we're helping and also providing some positive updates and hopefully bring some much lighter episodes that are going to be uplifting and positive and hopefully help balance out some of the sadness that we talk about. The other thing I want you to know is that we're going to be going bi-weekly going forward now, and that's just so that I can accommodate producing an episode within my schedule and make it easier for me to get the content to you. And then any ad revenue or anything that is generated from merch or anything else will be donated directly to Angels Voices Silence No More. So by listening to this podcast, you are going to be helping out families in New Mexico directly who are fighting for justice. So you really are true advocates. And I would just ask that if it makes sense for you, if you have the budget, please patronize our sponsors, because those sponsors are going to keep us providing this mission in helping families that are fighting for justice. Stay tuned to more information as it comes out in the future, but I just wanted to let you know that this is coming, and as things become more solidified, I will continue to update you as well. So for now, we'll be going bi-weekly, and you'll start to hear things slowly changing over time as we lead into May. But for now, I just want to say thank you so much for sticking with me and being patient while I've been out. And thanks for listening. Stay safe, New Mexico.